Andrea Elram, and Brocha, I'm forgetting your last name. Anyway, without them, I don't know if we'd be able to be doing this. But we have them, so we're going to step into harmony. Coco Stanback, we're delighted to have her speak. She has a master's in psychology from Pepperdine University. Her BA's with a minor in bio is from UC San Diego. So she's a California gal. She's a certified ADHD life coach, a speaker, a parent educator, and she's the founder of Heart for Kids Coaching. She's dedicated to improving the lives of moms, kids, and families affected by ADHD or other social, emotional, or behavioral challenges. She's a professional member of CHAD, and she also, this is great, she volunteers for the organization by facilitating a parent support group in Spanish. So great. Her personal and professional experience make her uniquely qualified to help families reduce conflict, increase cooperation, find connection, and ultimately experience success managing their lives with ADHD. She lives with her husband of 31 years and enjoys the company of 3 grown sons when they visit. So we welcome Coco Stanback, Step into Harmony, bringing proactive and collaborative problem solving to ADHD relationships.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. I want to thank in a special way Joni, who invited me, and Alan and the rest of the team for having me today. I'm really, really excited to be here and share with you what I've learned along the way and my journey. So I will ask you to kind of join in and participate with me so that we can all learn from each other and have a great interaction, because I love to learn from everyone who's here. So I will ask questions of you along the way. So I thank you in advance for your participation. And to start, I'm just curious, what brings you to CHAD? As we're waiting for everybody to kind of get in and settled in, what brings you to CHAD? Is it you? Is it your partner? Is it your child? I'm curious what brings you to CHAD today. And I will look for the chat, and I'm sure the team will help me out. Let's see.
Would you like people to put it in the chat, Coco?
Yeah, so whenever I ask a question, and if they could just put it in the chat, and if one of you guys could read some of the answers, that would be great.
Sure. Do you want me to read some?
Sure.
Amy says her 12-year-old son. Cami says self-time management. Sylvia says my work with families with 1 or more members with ADHD. Lisette says her 15-year-old daughter. Craig says collaborative problem solving sessions and interactions with spouse and 16-year-old daughter. We've got myself, spouse, and 12-year-old son. My middle daughter, 12 years old.
Nice. So, and like Alan shared, I am a mom of 3 grown men, now young men, and 2 have ADHD and other complex issues. And my middle son, even though he was my easy peasy kid, still has significant executive function challenges. So it's a whole family. I say my husband, my 3 sons, and a dog, all with ADHD. So I'm very familiar with this life. And so I love CHAD, and I love to be a part of it. So let's get started. So when you guys think of the word harmony, what comes to mind? What word, what image comes to mind when you hear the word harmony? And, you know, Joni, if you want to just read a couple of them, that would be great.
Yeah, peace, calm.
Nice.
Another woman was just saying that her 26-year-old has ADHD and anxiety issues.
Yeah.
There's a lot of peace and calm that's what harmony people think of.
Yes.
And cohesive.
Love it. So when I think of the word harmony, I think of a 4-part vocal group. The very first time I ever heard a vocal quartet, I was mesmerized, just absolutely mesmerized, how they could blend, you know, 4 completely different tones into this beautiful, beautiful combination. And so I think of that when I think of the word harmony, because the important thing of what we're going to talk about today is, in order to kind of work through difficulties in relationships, some people are concerned that they're going to have to lose who they are, or, you know, someone has to give in, and so that's why I chose the word harmony, is we get to keep our uniqueness, our individual sound, and still be able to combine together to make harmony. You know, I like to think that our relationships can be like that. Still unique together, but make this beautiful, beautiful combination as we work. And so I love this definition. Harmony is the pleasing combination of elements that go together well. And today, since I'm going to be talking about how to collaborate in collaborative practice solutions method, I love this additional definition that says an interweaving of different accounts into a single narrative. And so we are going to talk about how we can take everybody's point of view and perspective and weave it together. So who here could use more harmony in their relationships? Type yes in the chat box. Let me know.
We got a lot of yeses. Yes.
A lot of yeses. Yes, 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 right? We could all use it. So here's the question. What gets in the way? Right? It's pretty clear. We all crave it. We all want the harmony. We all desire it in our relationships. So what do you guys think gets in the way of building and maintaining harmony in our relationships? What would you say?
We have busyness.
Okay, that's a good one. What else?
Non-compromise, different priorities,
Okay,
differences of opinion, not understanding each other and the way we think.
there you go. Yeah. I'm looking for one particular word. I'm going to see. Keep reading and see if it comes up.
Self-confidence.
Ooh, that's a good one.
One wanting control.
Ooh, we're going to talk about that today. Yeah.
No time for patience.
No time for patience. Interesting. Yeah. The one word I'm looking for is, most people think conflict. We can't have harmony because there's conflict, right? And I've been working with families and parents with ADHD for over 10 years now. And what I see keeps us from having harmony is not really the conflict, but the difficulty we have in resolving that conflict, right? Conflict in itself doesn't have to be bad. We can get some really positive outcomes from entering into conflict, you know, that propel the relationship forward. But what we haven't, I think, learned to do is to resolve our conflict. And that's what I want to talk about today, is give you some tools to resolve conflict so that we don't end up like this, right? Pointing fingers or defensive, and we can really, really come together and collaborate. So I'm going to give you a little overview of what I'm going to cover today. So we're going to get into what is conflict. We're going to dig a little deeper, go over some definitions together so we can get a good idea of what conflict is. And then we're going to talk about what contributes to conflict. How do we contribute to conflict in our relationships? And there's 2 ways I'm going to talk about today: the roles that we play and limiting beliefs that keep us from being able to resolve our conflict. And then, of course, the last thing I want to share with you is how to use collaborative and practice solutions to resolve the conflict. And I've created this acronym STEP so that you can remember the steps in the model. So if one word you're going to walk away with today, I want you to remember STEP, STEP, because that is how you're going to remember what to do when you're in a conflict and you want to resolve it. So let's get started. All right. So what do you guys think conflict is? We've all been there, right? We've all have found ourselves in moments of conflict. This actually looks Very familiar. I can, and I didn't notice till after I chose the picture. I think she's like plugging her ears, like she just doesn't want to hear it, right? So they're in conflict. But how would you define it? We know what it feels like when we're in it. So how would you define conflict?
We have disagreement,
Okay.
difference of opinion.
Okay. What else?
People are thinking.
Yeah, like we all know what it feels like. It's hard to define. And here's one thing we all know, that we are all here today, that ADHD can make conflict more frequent and more intense, right? And some of the areas that I see challenges around are spending habits, running late, sharing household responsibilities, cleanliness or disorganization, forgetting, that can be seen as broken promises, in-laws. I mean, what else? There's a lot, right?
Somebody said not being heard.
Ooh, I love that. Not being heard. Yes. We are going to talk about that. So important. So here's a definition that I love that has really helped as I work with families to kind of really be clear, right? So conflict is a disagreement through which those involved perceive a threat to their needs, interests, or concerns. And several people have mentioned that today already. That is what conflict is, and if you notice, I have underlined some words in this definition, right? So what two big words do you see here that you can see could lead to conflict? What do you see?
For me, it's threat.
Yeah, absolutely. And another big word here is perceive, right? So we perceive a threat, and several people mentioned to our needs, interests, or concerns, because bottom line, we all want to be seen, heard, and validated. And when that doesn't happen, we can feel threatened. So here's another question. What happens when we as human beings are threatened?
We fight back.
We fight back. Yes. What else?
We react.
React. Exactly.
We fight or flight.
Exactly. We get triggered. Here's our trigger guy, right? We totally get triggered when that we perceive there's a threat. And then our response adds fuel to the fire, right? So that's what we're going to talk about. There are a couple of ways that the way we respond can add fuel to the fire, and what contributes to that. So one of the things we do is we can fall into playing a role. We can fall into the way we respond because we are triggered can lead us into one of these three. So I don't know if you've heard of this before, but it's, well known in all storylines. There's the victim, the villain, the hero. So I'm going to read brief definitions of each of these and then see who you can identify with. Okay, so the victim says, no one listens to me. It doesn't matter what I say anyway. Someone's always picking on me. This is helpless. This is hopeless. Never mind. It's not worth it, right? That's the victim. The villain, you have to listen to me. I'm right. I have the answers. You don't know anything. And they can jump into blaming, attacking, or accusing. That's the victim. The hero stands on the high moral ground, right? Their approach to conflict is trying to appeal to you to get you to understand that they're right. They have better morals and better beliefs. And if you would just accept it, then everything would be okay. So those are the victim, the villain, and the hero. So which character do you get triggered into the most? The victim, the villain, or the hero? What would you say?
We have one hero, but that's for me. we we have 2 victims. We have a villain.
Mhm. Yeah,
But someone said, but sometimes any one of the 3 or all
exactly,
of the 3.
exactly,
I have a
exactly.
villain.
Right. We can jump in and morph into all of these. You know, it can happen within one situation, one conflict. And so absolutely. And just so everybody knows, there's no judgment here. This is just to bring awareness, right? Because awareness brings change. There's no judgment around this. I'm just trying to teach you that sometimes we can fall into these traps. And what happens is that this is what can lead us to feeling stuck, right? Because we end up fighting and engaging in ways that most of the time don't even deal with the real issue. And so we can really, really, really get stuck. So
Sue says, my son pegs me as the villain, but I wish I was more and more his hero.
oh,
And Liz says, I'm both my daughter's villain and hero.
oh, yeah. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard in the parent relationship. And the idea is that we can do something else, right? We can do something different. So we can choose to not play the victim, the villain, or the hero, and instead become genuinely curious. Then we can appreciate what the other person thinks and feels. So that's my tool for you, is that if you can learn to step into curiosity, when we step into curiosity, we step out of judgment. They can exist in the same space. And that gives us the pause to take in and listen to what the other person has to share. And just like, you know, when the other person feels heard, right, understood, then they are more willing to hear our side. So it's important to take that first step. And in the coaching world, we call this, you know, the learner's path. So taking the learner, the goal is for you to become the learner. You know, to be open to not knowing and not having the answers. And instead, your goal is to inquire without judgment. We're going to talk a lot. This collaborative approach involves a lot of this piece, right? Because when we have curiosity and compassion when we're interacting with others, then we build bridges, right? And we deepen the relationships and we can solve our disagreements. So that's the goal. So that's one thing that gets in our way, is kind of our roles in the conflict and how we respond when we're in conflict. The other thing that can get in our way are limiting beliefs. So limiting beliefs are these core beliefs that we carry with us, and typically they're developed in our childhood, right? And we hold them to be truth. And so we keep repeating these patterns over and over because we believe them to be true. But they can limit us. That's why they're called limiting beliefs, from showing up as our best selves. So there's 4 that I want to share with you tonight that show up in conflict. So you can kind of, again, try to see where you identify yourself. No judgment, just awareness. So the first one is the belief that we need to explain our side first. You know, just if you just listen to me first, the reasoning is, if the other person would just understand my perspective, then they'll come to understand that I'm right and everything will be fine. So we can jump in. Now, the problem with this limiting belief is it makes us really quick to speak, right? It leaves little room for considering that. And it gets us stuck in this, we're right? We just have to do this first. So that's one of the limiting beliefs. The next one is that we're really good listeners. A lot of us believe we already are really good listeners. Here's the problem, is when we think this, then we think we don't have to listen anymore because we already know what the other person's going to say, and it can lead us to missing important information that the other person shares when we carry this limiting belief. The third one is that, we're unafraid. We convince ourselves that we're unafraid. And what happens is we can present with a very tough exterior, right? And it keeps us from being vulnerable, and it can make us extremely defensive, right? When we carry this limiting belief that I'm not afraid. And the reality is we all have fear, right? And deep down, like we've been talking about, we're all afraid that the other person is not going to listen or validate our point of view. And the very last one is that the idea, the limiting belief that someone has to lose in order for someone else to win. And typically that puts us in a situation where there's got to be a winner, there's got to be a loser in this conflict. And then, of course, we want to be the winner, right? So we become very competitive or dig in our heels. And then we can get blind to what's really going on and the real issue at hand. And we want to focus on winning. So those are the 4 limiting beliefs that can show up in conflict. And all of these keep us from resolving conflict. So after listening to those 4, which one do you identify with the most? 1, 2, 3, or 4? And I'm going to take a sip of water while you guys type that in the chat. Anyone identify with any of them?
We have some ones. We have some ones.
Some ones.
We have a 4.
Mm-hmm.
We have an all.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
That's from Katie.
Okay.
I'm going to try it as a 1.
You're going to do it as a 1? Yeah.
Yeah.
I dare to say that's pretty common with ADHD because we could be impulsive, and we can like jump in and say, just listen to me. I know it's right. Okay, so we've learned what can get in the way. We've learned how we contribute to conflict. Today, I want to teach you something new, a different approach to dealing with conflict. Because I believe we all want a better way, right? We all want to be able to learn to resolve our disagreements. So I will be teaching you Dr. Ross Green's collaborative proactive solutions approach, tailored for adults, because I've done this especially for you guys. So that's where I added the STEP acronym so you can remember. But before we go there, there's something super important that we have to talk about that cannot exist. You can't do the model if you don't know this piece, and it's expectations. So without knowing it, we can't really resolve our conflicts if we don't know what the expectation is. So I want you to think for a moment of an incident or an occasion where you felt really irritated or annoyed, and hold that example in your mind because I'm going to be asking you some questions, okay? Just something that's happened. It could be with your partner, with your kids, with a coworker, it doesn't matter. Just something that, irritated you or annoyed you. And I'm going to use an example in my own life. So for me, it is coming home and seeing dirty dishes in the sink. That really irritates me. And it kept happening, right? So I come home and there's dishes in the sink, and I just immediately feel like irritated, frustrated. And so I think it was 3 or 4 days in, I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Why am I? And I'd go in and I'd wash the dishes anyway and put them away. And, I kept repeating, but I was really frustrated and annoyed. And so I asked myself, what is my expectation here? Why am I getting frustrated? Why am I getting irritated? And I realized after thinking through it for a while that my expectation was that the other members of my family rinse their dish and put it in the dishwasher, or wash their dish after they had cooked. And we all know COVID, right? We're all at home. We're in the kitchen all day long. We're cooking 3+ meals a day. And if you have multiple people in your home using, it can get pretty gnarly pretty fast. So I can honestly tell you, with working with parents and even adults, that the number one precursor to conflict is not knowing your expectation. It's a result of an unmet expectation. So it's super important that you know and are clear what your expectations are. So keep that idea that I asked you in mind, and I'm going to ask you 4 questions. See if you have gone through these steps. So if you're irritated or annoyed about something, there's a good chance that there's an unmet expectation. And the first step is to become aware, like my example with the kitchen. Like I knew I was irritated and frustrated, but I didn't know what it was. And so I had to really pause and think, okay, what am I expecting others in my household to do? So the first step is to even be aware, be conscious of it. So are you aware? Do you know what your expectation is? Number two, are you clear? It's important to be very clear about what you expect. Number three, have you communicated that expectation? The interesting thing about this example I give you guys with the kitchen is I hadn't told anybody my expectation. Once I did this exercise, right, I'm like, because I do it for myself. I'm like, wait a minute. Well, they don't know that, you know, what did my magical thinking came into mind. Like, surely they'll know that if, you know, they use a dish, they're supposed to clean it. No. So it only lived within me. And so, important piece to communicate it. And the last piece is to make sure there's agreement, right? So make sure that you've know your expectation, it's clear, you've communicated, and there's agreement around it. If you've done all of those pieces, then we can move into working out this model because it's super important to get that clear. And if you said yes to all of these and this incident or whatever is still happening, then you have what we call an unsolved problem. So in Dr. Green's model, the whole idea is that we can learn to solve these unsolved problems, which are unmet expectations. And that is what we're going to do. Now, what happens typically is that instead of resolving collaboratively and working together, we end up here, right, in a duel and a power struggle. And here's the difference between this model and our typical response is that we are not going to battle opinions, battle, you know, solutions. We're not doing that. We're going to go deeper than that because when we get stuck here, Dr. Ross Green calls this dueling solutions. When it's your solution versus their solution and you're just stuck, you're in a duel, you've locked horns, you know, and the only way this ends is either someone gives up, gives in, or quote unquote dies in the conflict, right? And so we're not going there. We're going to do it a different way. And here's what we're going to cover today. So STEP, remember that word, STEP. This is how the model works. First, you seek to understand, then to be understood. Empathy is an essential element of this whole model. It cannot be done without it. And then the very last is you problem solve for the win. And really, it should say win-win. That's what we're looking for. We're problem solving for the win-win. So here we go. We're going to step into harmony. First one is seek to understand. So, okay. So wouldn't it be great if we could just do this, you know, put a little glass to someone's brain and hear their thoughts and their point of view and their concerns, and that would be great. And then we'd be done. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. And here's an important piece to this whole model. It cannot happen in the moment. It cannot happen when we're triggered. It cannot happen when we're, you know, frustrated and upset. It can only happen in a calm, neutral moment. Never in the heat of the moment. And so in order to really understand the other person's point of view, I'm going to give you 3 tips because it does take effort to really understand the other person. So the first one is using reflective listening. Like looking in a mirror, you're going to reflect right back. So when someone shares with you their point of view, their perspective, their concerns, you're going to reflect back and then ask for more information. Tell me more. I'm not sure I understand. How so? And I'm going to continue my dirty dish example with you guys later on and share with you what I did in my conversation with my husband, actually, and how we resolve the conflict. So tip number one is use reflective listening. So that literally means reflect right back what they said. Don't change it. Don't arrange it. Don't excuse it. Don't try to explain it. Just reflect right back and then ask for more information. That's when you're seeking to understand. The next tip is you ask open-ended questions. Super important. Who, what, where, when. What word is not here? Can you guys see what W word is not here? Okay, it's the 3-letter word that causes so much trouble in relationships. It's the why. Why is not here? Why is a trigger word. Why puts the other person on the defensive. It carries judgment with it. You can not have any judgment when you're asking it. You could be genuinely concerned, but that word really triggers people. So stay away from why and ask who, what, where, when questions. That is the first step. You're seeking to understand. You're asking reflective listening. You're asking open-ended questions, and you're going to keep asking until they have no further concerns. Right? I love this. Like, you're following the path until the light bulb. You finally get their perspective. You finally understand their point of view. You finally understand what's making it difficult for them to meet your expectation. And then you summarize, right? So let me go back to my dirty dish example, right? So right now, most of the time, it's just me and my husband. Sometimes my boys come over, which complicates the situation. But in this particular example, it was just me and my husband, and I kept coming home from work downstairs to the kitchen and finding the sink full of dishes, right? And so I practiced this with my husband, and you start with a neutral observation. Hey, I've noticed. Or if you already have an agreement, you can say something like, honey, you remember when we agreed that this and this was going to happen? I'm noticing you're having a hard time with that. Can we talk about it? Right? So that's what I did. And I asked him, what is making it hard for you? And it was actually, I love this model because it was so fun to work through it with him. And he was very quick to tell me the reasons why. And I was very surprised, to be honest. He had very specific reasons why it was very hard for him to follow through. Here's just some of them, okay? And I kept asking until he didn't have any more. So the dirty sponge grossed him out. There was nowhere to put the clean dishes, and his vegan brush, because my husband's vegan, was being used by meat eaters. So it was mixing cleaning items that had been cooked with meat with his vegan brush. So it totally knocked him off his game, and he didn't want to keep doing that. It was just too much. Okay, so here's the second part of the model. I'll come back. The T. Then to be understood. So first you seek to understand, then you get to be understood. And the second part is you get to share your concerns or why it's difficult for you when that expectation is not being met. And that's why I love this model, because a couple of people tonight shared, hey, when I'm not heard or when my concerns aren't taken into account. And this model gives you that opportunity to do both. So it's your turn to share your concerns, and you can say something like, the thing is, or my concern is, or can I share my concerns around that? And you get to share your side of the story. Typically, here's a rule of thumb for you guys to remember, because believe it or not, it's really hard, just like it's hard for people to have clear expectations, it's hard for them to know their concerns. I've worked with lots and lots of people, and this is a really hard piece. So to help you, it typically falls in how it's affecting you or how it's affecting others. That's kind of, it'll help you kind of put a framework around your concern. So for me, my concerns with this dirty dish thing was that I didn't want food, accumulated in the sink after a long day and have critters visit us. That was one of my concerns. I was really tired and felt like it was unfair that I'd have to do that. And here's a big one. It was super important to me that I could trust my husband in our relationship. If we had made an agreement, that he would follow through. And that was one of my concerns that I voiced. And so super, super important. Now, like I said, empathy is essential. It's a key ingredient to all of this. It cannot work without it. And the great news is that we are wired for empathy. And so we have something called, I'm sure you guys have heard of it, mirror neurons, right? That help us feel the experience of another. And it's the key is that we practice this because we are wired for it. And this whole model helps you to practice empathy. And there's 4 qualities I want to share with you today to help you as you grow in your empathy using this model. So one of them is perspective taking. That's what the first step does. It helps you to kind of step into somebody else's shoes. The second one is avoiding judgment, right? Because judgment, criticism doesn't allow us to really understand the other person. The third one is recognizing the emotion in others. That is part of empathy. So really connecting to your child, your spouse, your friend, your coworker, whoever it is, that emotional piece, and then communicating and understanding. So empathy is super, super important and a key element in this model. And so to remember to practice that, you can remember these 4 steps. Okay, one last step, the P. So the last step in the model is we're going to problem solve, like I said, for the win-win, right? Not just I'm going to win, but we're going to win. And we're going to find a solution that works well for the both of us, for the, both parties involved. And so here's what you do when you're practicing the model. You take one of your concerns, one of, in my case, his concerns, and you find a solution that works for both of you, addresses both concerns. Back to my dirty dish example, right? I spoke to my husband, he gave me his concerns, I shared my concerns, and then you put them together and you say, I wonder if there's a way we could find a place to put the dishes, right? That was one of his concerns, like where do they go? So that I don't have to come downstairs and do the dishes after work, right? That was, so I put those 2 concerns together. And here's the criteria for this. Number 1, it needs to be realistic. So this is a piece people forget and don't really take the time to go through. So whatever your solution is, it needs to be doable. It needs to be possible for both of you. Whatever you promise, you can actually do it. So it needs to be realistic. So you need to test it and actually ask the other person, okay, can you really do it? Can I really do it? Can we really commit? Is this realistic? And then the last piece is it needs to be mutually satisfactory. And with parents and kids especially, this is a big one because sometimes kids can come up with solutions that sound great to them, but it's not going to work for the parent, and vice versa. Sometimes the parents think they have a great idea, but it doesn't work for the kid or the teenager. So it's important to keep doing it and keep looking for a solution. And of course, the goal is that you find something that's a win-win solution, and it's possible. I've seen it over and over and over really work. And here's a great piece to remember with this model when you're looking for a solution. A lot of people think that the solution means, okay, a compromise. Okay, I'll give a little, you give a little, and we can compromise. And that can work. But in this model, the idea is that your solution is more about creating something new that works for both of you. I like to think of it as an invention. It's not just a giving in or a compromising. It's actually something new that you guys can do together so that you can end with a win-win. Does anybody have any questions so far? Anything at all? Take another sip of water. Okay. So what I love about this model is that the ultimate goal is to meet the concerns of both parties, and resolve it so that there can be harmony, and you keep your own, you're validated and you're heard, and you get to share your concerns, and it's a good thing. And so super, super important to remember that it can work as a win-win for both people. Here's a very last piece to the puzzle. Let's say you come up with a solution, and you try it. Dr. Green recommends a week. Let's say you find the solution and you're trying it. You try it for a week and it didn't work. Like, you're still having the same problem. That's okay. He calls that not having a durable solution, right? You tried it, you came up with a solution, it didn't quite work. That's okay. You come back to the table and you tweak it, and you talk about, okay, what about it's not working? What about it is working? What can we do differently? What can we try? And that is part of this model, to keep at it. And eventually you do get to a durable solution. So, to finish with my example in my hubby, we had this conversation. We talked about his concerns. We talked about my concerns. And then we came up with a solution. And he's actually so excited. I mean, he's been doing the dishes every night, since we've had this talk, because his concerns were addressed. And when I talked to him further about it, he actually shared that he often feels that his concerns are going to be like, who cares if someone's using your vegan brush, or like dismissed. And even though we've been married 31 years, and even though we've gone through all kinds of stuff together, there's still that fear, like, oh, you're not going to really take this into consideration. And so it just showed me once again how important it is to really give the other person, time to really share their concerns and to validate them. And so far, so good. We'll I can update you guys after a while, but he was actually very excited to come up with the solutions, and we figured out a plan, and all concerns got addressed. One thing that happens that I've noticed is once you start addressing one concern, so we started with where to put them, where to put the dishes, and figured that out, it kind of snowballs. And then we figured out what to do with the brush, and then we figured out what to do with all the concerns that he had. And together we came up with a solution that worked for both of us. So that is the model in a nutshell. So remember STEP. And those are the steps to remember on how to resolve conflict in your relationships. So let's test your memory. Can you guys remember what the S is for? You can type that in the chat. What is the S for? Anybody yet, Joni?
We just got seek to understand.
Yay! Seek to understand is S. T. What's the T?
Then to be understood.
Then to be understood. Yes. And the E stands for?
Empathy.
Empathy. Can't do it without the empathy. And the P, what is the P?
Problem solving.
Problem solve for the win-win. Super important that you're problem solving to find the win-win solution. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for this opportunity. I really appreciate Ellen and the team for inviting me here with you guys. After every talk, I ask one last question, is to think about what was your aha moment? What one thing you heard today resonated with you? What's one thing that you'll take with you and start practicing? Because it's a lot of information. I understand that there's a lot, and I believe in taking little steps. So would you please share with me what's your one aha, or what's your takeaway for today?
We also have a couple people that would like to ask a question, Coco.
Sure,
So
absolutely.
should we ask someone to unmute to ask their question, or do you want me to read it? Well, one I don't know. Should we ask them to unmute to read
However you want to do it. Yeah, after they.
Sue has a question. Sue, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Oh, sure. Hi.
Hi there.
Hi. Yes, I have a question because your example was good for the.
Uh-oh, I lost sound.
Sue, we can't hear you.
Where's that? Is that better now?
Yes.
Okay. So your example was good, but I'm working with not an adult that has ADHD, but a 9-year-old son.
Okay.
And so it's very hard for there to be really a calm moment because not only does he have ADHD, he has high anxiety and ODD.
Yeah.
So so it's hard to find like this time to have understanding and empathy, to have a dialogue with someone when there's almost irrationalities going on. Excuse me, buddy. And he's stepping into my call. He's supposed to be in bed. Go to bed. Daddy will get you, honey. And so sorry about that. He's like, are you talking about me? So anyway, so it's hard to have that, okay, this dialogue of give me your reasons and, all of that when there is no rationale to.
Yeah. It is super important to still find a calm moment. What I would ask you is, can you give me an example of an unmet expectation? Can you give me one example that you're working on?
With him?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it could be as simple as getting out of the house on time to get to school.
Okay, so that's a perfect example. Let's pause there to kind of help you walk through it. So with kids, and time management is a big piece. But what I would encourage you to do is break down the morning routine into every single little thing that he's expected to do and see where he's getting stuck. Because getting out of the house in the morning on time is this huge lump for him. Because he's got to get up, he's got to get dressed, he's got to brush his teeth, he's got to have breakfast, he's got to whatever else he's got to do.
Yeah.
And so he's getting stuck somewhere along the way. And then that would be the one thing that you would talk to him about, not in the moment, in a neutral moment when you're driving in the car, when you're going, get a treat, when you're sitting at dinner, whatever is not in the moment. And so, and then just start with a neutral observation and get curious. So like, let's say you've broken it down and you realize that the piece that's really hard for him is he takes too long getting dressed. He gets lost in what he's choosing, and that takes him too long.
Right.
So then you would start there and you would ask him, hey, honey, I noticed in the mornings it's taking you whatever time to get dressed when we only have this amount of time. And remember that you communicate that expectation to him first. So you would actually say to him, I'm just going to use a name. I don't know, your son's David, we have 10 minutes to get dressed, right? So it's clear, it's communicated. He understands that that's the time you have. So once you've stated that, then you can say, honey, I've noticed it's taking you longer than 10 minutes to get dressed in the morning. Can you tell me what's hard about that? And that's where you start. So it is, and that's a good point you bring up, because with kids, it's not like we can sit down and have a full-blown all 3-step conversation. So the very first step, I'm really glad you brought this up, is just to do the first piece, just seek to understand their point of view. And then once you do that, then you can take the next piece and so on. Hope that helps.
It does. I think I've, also what has helped too is, we're a list kind of family. We find that helps him a lot. We make a list. So we have, a checklist that was put together. We've before the school year started, an agreement that was signed and all that kind of stuff. We have timers, like all of these things. But I think it's when he's slow, he's holding up the rest of the family, and then he gets anxious, and then the oppositional defiance sets in. So it's like this snowball effect, and then before we even get to school, the whole carload is just not in a good spot.
Yeah, I can relate to you. I remember those days. So yeah, morning routines are really, really hard. And there's something, I didn't mention this today, but this model is based on the assumption that kids do well if they can, right? So they're doing the best they can, which also means adults are doing the best they can. So there's something getting in his way. He's not, trying to be difficult. There's really a step in the process that is challenging for him. And that's where that seek to understand comes in. And when you can really understand his point of view, his perspective, his concerns, you really start coming up with, oh, that's why it's hard for you. Okay, how do we address this, instead of kind of the battles, and if they're anxious, then they're going to push back. And that's where you say that opposition kind of shows up, and it can get really ugly really fast. So yeah, see if you can get curious and see which part of the morning routine is hard for him.
Well, thank you for that. I do tell myself often, because I've, been learning a lot about this, that I probably sound like, when I ask for something to get done, it sounds like we're Charlie Brown's teacher to him. So it's all a lot of want, like it's not clear. And once I tell myself that, when I'm in the moment of saying, put your shoes on for, the 12th time, I have to realize that, 11 times now, he doesn't hear it as that. And it actually helps me. It sounds crazy, but it really helps me to calm down and go, okay, just take a breath. And I sound like Charlie Brown's teacher to him. So that's what I have to tell myself.
Exactly. That's awesome. That's
Thank
great.
you, I appreciate it. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So we have another comment from Katie that she says, many of the conflicts or disagreements I have had as an adult with ADHD have centered around compromise, whereas I give in and the other party is the one who does not compromise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in a sense, that's what we want to change with this model, right? To be able to, and if you're giving in all the time, or you feel like you're compromising, see if you practice this empathy step and really understanding if the other individual, whomever you're with, it will come and listen to your part too. And I think one of the things you mentioned though is that because they're compromising, it's usually solution versus solution, right? I want this, I want that. And you're fighting over what you want, instead of really digging deeper and saying, okay, well, what about this is important to me? What unmet need do I have in this situation? What concern do I really have when this doesn't happen? And then you drop into the concerns and the unmet needs, instead of staying stuck in battling, like this two guys battling, right? The solution, or the I want this and I want that. So I hope that helps. Try to go deeper and figure out what your concerns are and what the other party's concern is, and see if you can find a solution there. Because you will not find solutions if it's a durable solution if you're just fighting the wills or the wants, or the my idea versus your idea. That's why we get stuck. We forget to go deeper. So that helps.
So Craig was kind enough to put into the chat, if anybody wants to take a screenshot of the information, just some sites where you can find out more about the collaborative problem solving that Coco's talking about. There's a TED Talk, Rethinking Challenging Kids, where there's a skill, there's a way. J. Stewart Avalon has a TED Talk, and there's a site in the chat, so people can just screenshot that and go look at that if they'd like to do that.
And it's if you could add Dr. Ross Green, lifeinthebalance.org. And Dr. Ross Green has a podcast that's free to parents. He has tons of information on his website. And if you go on his website, there's a walking tour for parents. There's a walking tour for teachers. He goes really in depth into the model. And like I said, lots of free stuff. And the podcasts are awesome for parents to listen to. So any more questions?
Not that I see, not yet.
Okay. So if we could just have your aha, your takeaway, what you're going to take with you from today, that would be great. If there are no other questions.
Does anybody have any takeaways that they want to share? I can read them off. Lots of thank yous. My takeaway is really stay curious, ask questions, and listen without thinking about how I'm going to respond to what I think they're already, when I know they're already going to say.
Yeah.
Actually listen without responses in my head.
Awesome.
I would add with responses and solutions.
Say that again.
I would respond not just without, I would say without a solution. I mean, I think that we often go into a conflict situation with our own ideas about how it's supposed to turn out, how we wish it would turn out. And when we can be open to thinking outside the box, sometimes things can actually be different. Now, some other people wrote, not only thanks, Coco, but I really, Sue said, I really like the empathy part, for I always need to remind myself, people are writing, how important that is versus exploding. Charles, hi, nice that you're with us. Charles wrote, realizing the difference between understanding and understood. Understand and understood. Thank you. Hi, Jody. Jody wrote, thank you. This is very helpful. Seeking to understand is the key for me. Also, this needs to be implemented when everyone is calm, not triggered, which at times may be very hard in our household.
Yes.
Liz wrote, my takeaway in being clear about what do I expect. Just remind yourself people may not understand what you are expecting, especially with children not knowing what it's like to be living with a 6-year-old with ADHD.
Yeah.
Craig says, seek to understand, but don't ask why.
There you go. I know that's a hard one. And it's really hard because we're, I think, curious. And so we think why is an okay answer, but yeah, it can really trigger us. Awesome. Well, I think I'm done on my part. Thank you, guys.
Yep, you have a lot of thank yous, Coco.
This was wonderful. Just what a fabulous presentation. And I love the way you translated the Ross Green's work, which is really meant for kids, into working with adults.
I did this for you, Ellen. That's what you need to do. I did it for you.
Well, I think it all these thank yous and all this feedback, lets us know that this is needed with our adult relationships as well as with our relationships with our kids. And I think you've put it into a format that really is easy to take in. Hard to remember all the steps.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's especially true because when we get triggered, we go back to being kids anyway.
Exactly.
Right? So it's really all the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
love that image of that. Have you guys seen that? It's a drawing of two adults, and they're mad at each other and they have their backs to back, their back to each other, but inside there's the child trying to touch the hand of the other, like the children are trying to connect and the adults are back to back. I love that image. Like inside of we all want that connection.
Yeah, I've never seen that, but that sounds really cool.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I know, me too.
It's
Send
two
it to us.
adults, so they're back to back, but inside the child within is touching the hand of the other. So it's really sweet.
Well, Coco, if you could unshare your screen,
Okay.
that would help me put up just a flyer that I need to put up, but I don't want to stop the conversation. I just wanted to make sure I can get that information out to people.
Sure, no problem.
Oops. Don't look at that, anybody. Okay.
Can you, yeah, press green.
There we go.
Oh, fabulous.
Okay.
So we have some fantastic speakers coming up. And in January, our very own Andrea Elram and two of her ADHD Coach colleagues are going to talk about stepping away from ADHD thinking traps, because we know that when we change the way we think, we can actually change the way we feel. That should be all of these talks are going to be great. We are so lucky. In February, we're going to have Mark Burton, who's a developmental pediatrician, and he's going to talk about beyond medication and about evidence-based non-medical care for ADHD, so that it's a more holistic approach. It's more evidence-based and it's integrative, which is really what's needed with ADHD. Medication alone is not the best solution in and of itself. In March, we're going to have Leslie Josell, who is going to talk about procrastination. She wrote a great, I love this title, How to Do It Now Because It's Not Going Away, an expert guide to getting stuff done. She speaks all the time. She's an educator. She founded Order Out of Chaos, and she also created an academic planner, which is great for time management. So join us for any or all of these. In April, we're going to have David, I never know how to say his last name, Guerick. Guerick? Okay. He's going to talk about ADHD coaching and how it can help to uncover the strengths that are buried within us. And then in May, this is amazing. Melissa Orlov is going to talk about the ADHD effect on marriage. She has written a couple of books. One is The ADHD Effect on Marriage, and the other is The Couple's Guide to Thriving with ADHD. And she's actually one of the few professionals that targets marriage and relationship issues as they impact on ADHD couples. So we sign up if you want, take a screenshot, or you can just go to our website. All this is listed. Our website is www. I'm looking at it. Oh, we have it at the bottom.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Joni. chad.net/chapter/545. If you don't have that and you just put Chad Bergen County, you should be able to get to it that way as well. One of my wishes for our Bergen County Chad chapter is that we have two support groups. Right now we have one, and that meets on Mondays, but we're lucky enough to have Joni, who has volunteered to lead a parent support group. So the Monday group will continue from 7:30 to 8:30, the third Monday of each month. And Isabel will continue to run that. But Joni, who is, I'll tell you about her in a minute, she's offering this parent support group